Hi, welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. We're going to talk about some of the lessons we can learn from this week's ThreatTraq stories. I'm here with Tony Tortorici. Nice to see you again, Tony.
Hey, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this week's stories. Matt Kaiser brought us a really interesting story about code repositories and a vulnerability there. First, tell me really briefly, what is a code repository? How does it function? Why do people use it?
So a code repository is a quick way to store different pieces of code that maybe a couple developers will work on, or an entire group. Maybe it's a global development company, but they will store it in a central location for other developers to pull it down, use it. It can go, whether it's a company-wide one or you can do it public on the internet, and that's a way for other developers to share their code with people that may be interested in it.
Matt told us about how researchers have discovered a very clever way that people can get into these repositories who aren't supposed to be there.
Right. So basically what Matt described was, if a company, any company ABC is what Matt used, has a private repository inside their company, but that repository links up with something that's internet facing or a public repository. And the trick was, at least what the researchers found, is if you understand the naming convention of the various packages that the company is using, you can post something on the public repository, and if the management software has access to the public repository, looks and sees an updated version, they will serve the updated version versus the one that they have inside their company. So by doing this, an actor can literally hijack that communication, and whatever they put on the public repository would end up being served to the developers inside the company. So it's an interesting trick.
So for people that are using these repositories, what can they do to prevent this from happening?
There's a couple of different things that Matt had talked about. Some of it was looking at your repository management software that's inside your company and restrict what it can do. Don't look out to the public, or look out to the public for certain things, and therefore you're negating the attack or the method that the researchers use. Now, the researchers didn't attack, but it could be used as an attack. One of the other things was literally going out into those public repositories and posting things that are similar to what you have privately, but changing version levels. And Matt went in and described exactly how that would function to prevent it.
Now, tell me about the story you brought to us, which is about Microsoft blocking zero logon vulnerabilities.
So what I covered today was a mode that Microsoft is enforcing with their February Patch Tuesday, related to a CVE that was released out last year in 2020. So basically, what I talked about today was the patch should already be applied from the CVE from last year, but Microsoft is making some tweaks in the way that various accounts would function to prevent the vulnerable RPC exploit that was found last year.
So what does this mean for users now?
For standard users, nothing. For domain administrators, people that have higher rights within a Microsoft domain, some of this may be a little difficult for them to maneuver around based on maybe their daily pushes or scripts, or the way that they try to manipulate those various accounts within the network. It's just going to make it a little bit harder for them, but it's going to make it more secure.
Now, George brought us a story about NAT slipstreaming and some vulnerabilities there. So tell me about it.
So what George had talked about today is some researchers found a vulnerability where you can get past natting and get into a local network. You have to use a link or some sort of actionable trigger to start the process. But what the researchers found out is once you get in, you can enumerate the internal network grab the information on what's on that network, and then you can go back in the same method and try to get a foothold or a beachhead into that environment. Now, what George had talked about was mainly local area networks that would be related to homes. We were talking a lot about IoT. He brought up a smart thermostat, a printer, anything that has standard credentials, admin, password, whatever, and has a area for the nefarious actors to gain a foothold, like an open web server or something very similar. A lot of things that typically happen within IoT devices that are not properly secured.
So how can they be secured?
Things like securing your IoT devices with non-standard passwords and usernames. We had talked about on the ThreatTraq that it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be super complex, but it has to be something that's not necessarily public. So if you're naming something, username or passwords inside your personal network, you can make it familiar to yourself, but not necessarily familiar to the public. One of the other items that was recommended was separating those particular smart devices or anything that's an IoT-related device on a separate network within your personal network. Now, this is more complex. That's when people start talking about VLANs. But there's certain home routers and other pieces of equipment that actually will allow that sort of separation between various devices that are that could be open, IoT related, versus maybe your home PC and your mobile device when you connect on your home Wi-Fi.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thanks for that great advice. And thank you all for watching. You can keep up with this great advice every week by clicking on the like and subscribe button below. And if you want to take a deeper look into any of these stories, click on the playlist below. We'll see you next time.